Hey viewer, something impressive happens when a guy leaves a note on a stranger's van that ends up changing his life. How so? You'll have to watch to the end to find out. A car is more than just a way to get around. It's a statement, or reflection of the driver's personality and ambitions. Unfortunately, we can't always get our hands on the perfect vehicle. Sometimes it's too expensive or just plain unavailable. After one Long Island boy missed out on his dream car, strange forces eventually brought them back together. But even once it was back within his grasp, he still had to clinch the deal of a lifetime. Kyle Cropsby of Lindenhurst, New York, always appreciated the beach lifestyle. He was constantly on the lookout for one missing piece that would complete his look. Back in 2010, Kyle hit the waves at Rockaway Beach, one of his usual spots. But when he took a breather, he finally spotted the treasure he'd been searching for his entire life. It was his dream car, a 1971 Volkswagen Type 2, also known as a minibus. It was a legendary vehicle, and quite rare. Volkswagen stopped making them years ago. Even though he was just 16, Kyle had a passion for automobiles and vintage car culture. Now that he was of driving age, he wanted nothing more than to someday get behind the wheel of a Type 2. He quickly jotted down a note, stating his interest in buying the minibus if it ever went up for sale. Kyle slipped it through a gap in the window. Rather than landing on the seat, however, it glided to the floor. Of course, Kyle knew that he'd probably never hear anything back from the van's owners, even if they did find the note. As a consolation prize, he took a photo of himself with the car. 8 years passed by. Kyle unsuccessfully contacted dozens of other Type 2 owners, and he even bought a similar van. But it just wasn't the same. He needed the real thing. Meanwhile, in Oakland, California, Chris Mead was busy getting his recently deceased father's affairs in order. While going through some old things, Chris opened up a book and a crumpled note slid out. It was the same note that Kyle had written 8 years ago on Rockaway Beach. Chris figured that his dad, Cornelius Mead, must have found it inside his van, placed it inside the book, and forgotten about it. So what was Chris to do? The minibus was his father's prized possession, something that he probably loved as much as his children. He was so attached to it that he even named it Matilda. He and Matilda went on adventures and drove across the country many times over. Cornelius spent more nights than he could count sleeping in the back of the minibus. Cornelius put so many miles on Matilda that the odometer ran out of digits to track its progress. Now that's a lot of zeros. Fortunately, Cornelius put a lot of money into the vehicle to keep it in decent shape. The engine and transmission still worked like a charm. The van deserved to hit the road again. Chris, who had no use for the Volkswagen, found a potential buyer with this note. But would Kyle still want the van after all these years? Would he even have the same phone number? Chris managed to reach Kyle, who was floored by his dream car finally becoming available. Chris figured with the right buyer it could fetch up $1,500. However, Kyle worked as a teacher and had limited funds. Would they be able to strike a deal? You've got to remember, Chris was in prime bargaining position. His father's vehicle was rare, and Kyle made it clear how much he wanted it. Chris could very easily upcharge him. Did he? Well, before we answer that, we'd like to remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell right now. If you do, comment Notification Squad, and we'll reply to all of you with a thank you. Chris not only gave one heck of a deal, he gave Kyle the minibus for free. He figured that the best way to honor his dad was to pass on Matilda to someone who would value the van as much as Cornelius did. Kyle felt overjoyed and said that only fate could have brought the Volkswagen back to him after all that time. He celebrated his new ride by decking it out with a fresh coat of paint. Matilda is the perfect ride for Kyle, as he's able to transport all his friends and their gear on surf outings. Plus, they're definitely riding in style.